the date of that Chilean coup?
1973.
What date?
Oh, 9/11. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
Great.
See you, Sandra.
Well, I'm going to do a little Q&A now, and then we'll go on to, I think there's a desire here. Okay, show of hands. There, there, there. We'll take 3 now, and then we'll move on. Okay, in the
Where
back.
you left off on journalists, it's remarkable that I guess you're still in. You say something about tenure, not only in, but in public schools where teachers are under attack, where tenure is under attack. If you teach history in a public school, or English or anything, it's very
Okay, we got it.
risky.
Um, There is no doubt that the higher education and public education are under concerted attack, right? Teachers' unions are under attack. Tenured faculty are under attack. This is partly much lower paid and more insecure workers, contract workers. You see it happening in the universities and the high schools and so on. But there's also a crucial ideological dimension to this. These are neoliberal forces that are trying to wipe out the academic space for critical discussion of the kind that we're having here. I think that's clearly going on. It should be and probably is the subject of whole panels at this conference. I don't personally feel that I'm at any risk at NYU because of I'm part of a big drive to attack NYU for its real estate adventures in Greenwich Village, and we're suing the city right now for approving their planned 2 million square foot expansion downtown. We have oral arguments before the U.S. Court of Appeals on Tuesday, so it's a serious fight. And even with that, I don't feel endangered, partly because I've always felt that if you have tenure, no matter where, the more prominent you are as a critic, the safer you are, because it just looks terrible if they go after somebody who people have heard of,
Great, thank you. Next question? Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment.
Sure.
I was thinking, since you were talking about it, that probably, Les, you should put this very significant social that we're describing up in your consequences, because it's the realization of the understanding of this, the disciplining of discourse in this country, and this goes all the way back to the Red Scares. And people are very clear, I would like to say, especially about Naomi Klein in that book, because that was, I think, 2002 when it was published. I mean, it's not just that if you say certain things, you commit professional suicide. It's also true that if you say other things and don't say those, you get social promotion, and you achieve. You are playing a fundamental role, which I won't characterize here. So I would like some further comments on that, because this, the charge of conspiracy is something that people actually anticipate in their own minds. It leads to a form of epistemological, I guess you could say, rupture with rationality. And I think that mental thing where you control what you're going to say, or you have gradations of it, is a very significant social fact in this country, and has been all the way back to the 30s and before.
Well, that's true, but I wouldn't say that's a consequence of 9/11. That's kind of the ground of everything that's happened. It prevents us from recognizing that this has all happened, and prevents us from discussing that this has happened.
We
Is it
could
not a
say that it's
consequence?
been exacerbated, I think, though.
Yes, it's been exacerbated because we're all at risk. We're all at risk of being, hurt in another terrorist attack.
And what came to mind is Christina Borgenson, right? She has spoken about her experience in covering the Flight
800.
Flight 800,
TWA.
TWA, and then also journalists like her had commented on the shrinking of the ability for investigative journalists to survive because of budgets. Because of budgets. We're going to shrink this over here. Bob, we're going to shrink that right there. But no, this is very real. The shrinking of of support, financial support within the press for investigative journalism, I think we could argue is also a consequence of 9/11. So I just want to add that. Let's see, we have here and then here.
I don't have a solution, but I'm wondering what you think of sort of a theory I have as to why the left is so adverse to this. And that is because back in the day, in the early 60s, there was the left and then the new left. And so the new left were younger, very radical, and they understood the Gulf of Tonkin, the 9/11 of our day, of that era. And so they considered themselves radical, and now those very same people, many of those people are the eminence gris of the movement. They're the establishment, they're the left establishment, yet in their mind, they're still living in the past. They think they're radical. And they are on the marionette stage, and on that marionette stage, they have a part. Granted, they're on the left side, but they're on the stage, and they don't want to get off that stage and look at who is doing the marionetteering. And so I feel that part of it is they own control of the conversation, and they know how far the electronic collar will take them right up to the border of the reservation. And it's because they're living in the past, and they are now, don't trust anyone over 30, that's now them, but they don't realize that they are now who the enemy was that they saw at the time.
Well, of course, that kind of thing will happen in any case as a generation ages.
It doesn't have to, though.
Well, it doesn't
This one
have
has,
to,
and
but
why
I
has it?
think we have to place this discussion within the larger context of what happened to the left after the 60s. There was an enormous extreme the left, in part, I'd say in large part, by promoting identity politics, which sort of supplanted economic analysis and a class-based critique in favor of a kind of race and gender agenda, which is extremely important and helpful in many ways, but it also sort of depoliticizes discussions and has resulted in giving us a choice of, Hillary Clinton for president because she'll be the first woman president. It's also enabled us to, many Americans, all too many Americans, Democrats and liberals, to tolerate what Obama does and apologize for it and defend it, even though if Bush had done anything like this, they'd go nuts. It's extremely dangerous, and it has everything to do with the dilution of left politics by identity politics and so on. Moreover, student debt has had the understandable effect of inhibiting younger people who are not as ready to hit the streets or protest as the people you're talking about were. And I'm really getting tired of hearing people, boomers, criticize the young for not being as radical as they were. It's a completely different world in which young people are looking at the prospect of lifelong peonage and no job, So they're not about to jeopardize what little chance they have, by going out and getting arrested, particularly when the police, as you pointed out, have become a really lethal force since the 60s. I mean, it was bad enough at the 68 Chicago Convention, but it was just billy clubs. Now it's like RoboCop, because they got all this Patriot Act money, and you're taking your life in your hands if you protest. Anybody who just says, oh yeah, let them go out in the streets is being really irresponsible, So the whole landscape of the left has changed beyond recognition.
And then also, of course, they wiped out the whole layer of leadership of Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. They assassinated our main leader. So who's going to step into a place that is ripe for assassination?
Absolutely.
Question?
Actually, just a footnote.
Yes.
With regard to Cass Sunstein, it should be pointed out that hideous paper, Cognitive Dissonance, I believe was published before Obama appointed Sunstein to a position in the government.
Is that right?
Yes. Sunstein, for I believe about 2 years, was either in the cabinet or a sub-cabinet position.
Right.
Talk about currying favor. A previous speaker, I think, has very correctly pointed out that there are both negatives and positives. And one can see Sunstein writing that paper with an eye to an appointment by the liberal Obama administration. And he got it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Right?
It's fascinating. Because this is a guy who specializes in First Amendment law.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
His name is Kafka.
Interesting, not surprising. Ms. Kath?
Who's his wife?
Okay, we're going to, two more questions, then we're going to move on and come back for questions.
I just wanted to point out what you said before about, they perpetuate wars and then, create all this lawlessness, like they could take the people's rights away because, we're in a war, so anything goes.
Right.
But I mean, it's obvious that it should be the other way around. I mean, the rights of the people should be protected under war, not stripped.
That never happens that way.
I mean, I feel like it should be the other way around.
It's contrary to the reality. Okay, folks, can we make it, okay, real quick, and then we have to move on.
All right, look, in the Nation magazine, they made an attack against 9/11 people. They called them idiots. And the Progressive magazine also, a few others. Why is that? Can you comment on, are they being paid by the CIA, or what do you
The
think?
Independent refuses to allow any.
I know. Okay, that's a very important question. I can answer it somewhat. I noticed when Fooled Again came out, this is directly relevant to your question. I said it was blacklisted, and I was struck by the following. By and large, the mainstream media ignored the book. Okay, it was Mother Jones that attacked it. It was The Nation that attacked it. Salon that attacked it. Now, why is that? Okay, I think to broaden the discussion, there are a number of reasons why the left doesn't want to go where we want them to go. Partly, it's just denial. The same kind of denial that other people who aren't on the left are afflicted with. They just don't want to go there. They don't want to think about it because the implications are too horrific and too challenging. It's much more comfortable to just restrict yourself to environmental activism, and reproductive freedom, and all the other. It's kind of like the street fair conception of politics. You go from table to table, you pick up different flyers, and I'll do a little of this and a little of that. When it comes to 9/11, when it comes to stolen elections, those are just fundamental assaults that you can't just partly get involved in, and people just don't want to go there. There are also people on the left who are kind of complicit in one way or another. Often funding has something to do with it. If you are funded by a particular foundation that doesn't want you to go there, you're not going to go there. And I think that this probably helps explain why a free press, sort of an activist organization that promotes, policies that will make the press less vulnerable to commercial interests. It's a great organization, but they refuse ever at their conferences to allow anyone to discuss election fraud. It just can't come up. They won't talk about it, and I think it has to do with their funding, okay? Let's be frank, there's also the fact that there are some on the left who aren't really leftists, okay? If you read widely in the literature of the CIA, you read Philip Agee's Inside the Company, like everybody should read this. It should be assigned to every high school student, He talks about, it's in diary form, so he talks about what they did every day in the CIA offices in Uruguay and in Ecuador and in Mexico. He spent 10 years in the CIA in the 60s. And, they had the leading liberal columnist in Ecuador on the CIA payroll. They gave him stuff to run as his own columns, I mean, in other words, abroad, the CIA has always co-opted liberal and socialist journalists and artists as part of their, endless drive against the Soviet Union. All right, so why wouldn't that kind of thing happen here? I mean, the most striking example is Daily Kos. Marcos Molitsas founded Daily Kos. Do you know the story of this guy? Somebody outed him as having trained at the CIA. This is Daily Kos. He founded Daily Kos. It's probably the most influential website related to Democratic Party politics. And he was outed as having trained at the CIA, and he admitted it. I think it was before the Commonwealth Club. He said, yeah, I did. It said, the CIA is a very liberal organization, he said. Which in a certain sense is true, you know? But it turns out that he comes from a very wealthy, coffee-growing family in El Salvador. Okay? How come he's this big liberal mover and shaker? What's up with that? Now, the reason why I mention this is that after the 2004 election, he laid down a diktat. He said there is not going to be any discussion of that election being stolen on Daily Kos. He forbid it. It wasn't going to happen. Forget it. Now, since then, some of the blogs on Daily Kos, people will write about it. But when it comes to the stuff that's edited, no, forget it. Okay, I have to ask myself, why is that? What is up with that? Why? And Nate Silver, the beloved statistics expert, who now writes for the New York Times, got his start at Daily Kos. And he's basically in the business of constantly assuring us that this or that election wasn't stolen and that exit polls are not reliable. There's just a piece the other day by him to this effect. Exit polls aren't reliable. So whatever insane outcome we see in election, and we're seeing them all the time now, and election after election, surprise victories by the right. It happened in Britain. It happened in Israel. It happened with the Scottish independence vote. It happened with Proposition 8 in LA, and it's happened with election after election after election in this country at the congressional and gubernatorial levels. It happened with Scott Walker and his people 4 times now in Wisconsin, right? To have a very influential columnist for the Times assure us that exit polls are all wet and that there's really no such thing as fraud is questionable. It's questionable.
Okay.
Did I answer you?
Yes.
We have to get to the next topic.
Yes, go ahead.
We have to get to the next topic. This is now to the phase here where we're talking about something very hopeful that I have seen as a solution since this was put on my radar screen. I want to get to the individual here who first informed me of this. This is Rick DeSantis. Any of you who were with us last September got to hear from Rick. He's a survivor of the South Tower attack. And after 13 years of silence, somebody in Florida where he was living gave him a copy of Loose Change, and he was then motivated to start speaking out about what he knew. And he had taken many, many photos the day of 9/11 and a few days after 9/11, and there's some unique angles from the south looking up north towards the towers of his photos. And now, Rick was contacted by Representative Walter Jones of Florida. Walter Jones was the guy who, in the drum beating, the saber rattling leading up to the Iraq War, coined the phrase "freedom fries." When there was everybody in Congress was bashing the French for not going along and following in lockstep with the Bush agenda to invade Iraq. Everybody remember the quote, "freedom fries," and it was all over the media. There was a big laugh, right? So there had been, in 2002, a report, the initial report on 9/11 by the Senate Joint Inquiry, an 860-something page report. And in that, there was a whole chapter eliminated, 28 pages. And Senator Robert Graham from Florida, former senator, who was the co-chair of the committee, of the Senate Intelligence Committee, was very troubled by this, and as well as Richard Shelby, Senator Richard Shelby, and many others, and has been speaking out about the need to release these 28 pages. They were very troubled by it, and wrote to President Bush. I'll get a little bit more into that, but now, since it was classified, these 28 pages, the politicians were very limited in what they could say about it because they would be breaking certain laws and get accused of espionage and who knows what else. Now, which is another consequence of 9/11, the threat that if you're going to say anything provocative about 9/11, you get charged with espionage. Okay, now, Robert Graham, then, in order to get a wider understanding of what was in those 28 pages, he fictionalized it in a book, a novel called Keys to the Kingdom. Then Walter Jones read the book, and it triggered his curiosity, and he started to wonder much more about 9/11, and then he made a request to the House Intelligence Committee to have access to those 28 pages to read them, which anybody in Congress can do. They have clearance if they submit a request to the Intelligence Committee. And there's a whole board, there's I think about 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats. And there's a committee chair. It used to be, I think, Mike Rogers, who recently, well, in the whole series of Edward Snowden revelations, you saw him all over TV saying Snowden's a criminal and, has committed crimes of espionage and so forth. He was the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Jones had to submit more than one request. Finally, he did get access. He read the 28 pages, and he was shocked. And folks, every congressperson who has read these pages has experienced an awakening. Okay? Walter Jones contacted this gentleman here, Rick DeSantis, and saying that he would like to get Rick's help, to release these 28 pages. And then he submitted what was at the time House Resolution 428. It's just a one-page resolution calling for Obama now to release the 28 pages. Now, in the new Congress, this past January, it had to be resubmitted. It was introduced right away, folks. They didn't wait. It was January 7th, actually January 6th, and on the 7th was this press conference, and it is now HRes 14. It's a bipartisan resolution. On the right is Walter Jones. Okay, on the left is Stephen Lynch, who's a Democrat. And this is what the underlying purpose of this resolution is. Okay, number one, government must be more transparent. Transparency is a very, very big buzzword, right? Because these politicians have to take a stand for transparency if we're to have a functional democracy, right? It's just a key ingredient. So they are running with this as a integral concept of why the public must demand the release of these 28 pages and why Congress must take action on it. 2, the 9/11 families who have suffered all these years deserve to know. Okay, now of course, well, how many folks are aware of the big 9/11 families lawsuit against the Saudi government? Okay, a few of us are, a few are not. There's a big, almost like, I guess you could call it a class action lawsuit. I think there are 6,000 9/11 family members on a lawsuit against Saudi Arabia for evidence, based on evidence that there's more of in these 28 pages about funding coming from certain Saudi royal family members. So, and that case went through the courts. It was defeated by the Saudi government. They appealed. The 9/11 family members appealed, and then they won the appeal. So it has been reinstated, and it is currently live and active and in action. So They need this, these 28 pages to be declassified. Then the third reason, now, Bush, W. Bush, right, he classified this chapter, his administration, in '02, and the reason why any information gets classified, the only reason it should be that it's a threat to national security. That it would be, quote, revealing state secrets or information that would be detrimental to the security of the United States, if it could be classified. Well, right from the very beginning, Bob Graham and others have been stating there's nothing in there that has anything to do with national security. It's more having to do with relationships, and they were all really dismayed. I mean, you could, if you look at the news clips on YouTube, you see like even like Richard Shelby and looking very sad. Like, no, this has more to do with relationships, you know, and yet protecting relationships, and there's. So anyway, I first want everybody to just understand these 3 points. This is the rationale behind the the current effort here to release the 28 pages. Okay, here's what some of the members who have read the 28 pages are saying. The 28 pages show the extensive advanced planning before 9/11. And he alludes to collaboration with other governments, not just Saudi Arabia, and government agencies. Now this is, the government agencies phrase is a very, very intriguing part. What they're referring to mainly, I think, is FBI cover-up and collusion, which I'll get more into here shortly. Walter Jones' statement, if the 9/11 hijackers had outside help, particularly from one or more foreign governments, the press and the public have a right to know what our government has or has not done to bring justice to the perpetrators. Thomas Massey from Kentucky, I went to the soundproof secret room here in Congress and read those 28 pages, and it was really a disturbing event for me to read those. I had to stop every 2 or 3 pages and rearrange my perception of history. It challenges you to rethink everything. Now, this is very, very powerful stuff. I mean, these are politicians who, let's just assume they knew very little, or that, like the general public, let's assume that they were just, consumed in the horror of the event, the emotional reaction to the deaths of 3,000 people and the attacks. Let's assume that they were coming from that angle, that we, quote, we were attacked, just like the Hermann Göring quote that Mark read. Well, after reading these pages, folks, there's an awakening that happens. And so the effort behind the release of these 28 pages is to get our Congress people to do what these did. Because there's so far just a handful. We need as many people as possible in Congress to read the 28 pages. And so there has been an effort going on since October of this past, of 2014, to work on a campaign to mobilize people around the country to just contact their congressman. Ask them to do 3 things. Read the 28 pages. Would you please read the 28 pages, and get back to me to let me know if you do. You got to follow up, check with them, and get the response. And then, secondly, to co-sponsor the bill. The co-sponsor the resolution. And then thirdly, in order for it to get voted on, the leader of the House, which is. He's John Boehner, has to allow it to come to the floor. So that's going to take a lobbying effort. It's going to take a lot of numbers. Okay, so this is where it is now incumbent upon us as citizens to get legislatively active, and it takes minutes. We have a website, by the way. Let me see if I can get to it here at one point and show it. We have a website, hr14.org. There's background on this, as well as a take action section, and within minutes, folks, 2 minutes, you can click a couple of buttons and put in your zip code, and it sends a letter to your Congress member. Following it up with a phone call, organizing with us to set up visits to their offices. And this is where if we want them to take action, we got to make noise, okay? And right here in Manhattan, by the way, Jerry Nadler, Congressman Jerry Nadler, whose district is Southern Manhattan, has been an obstruction. He does not want to participate in any way or form. This lady, Kat, would you like to tell your experience?
Yes, I went to the office and I talked with one of his representatives.
A little louder.
I went to Nadler's office and I set up a meeting with to say, why isn't he investigating this? Why doesn't he ask to read? And she keeps getting back to me with I finally met her, but it was just a brush off, really, left and right.
That's a question.
Yeah. Leslie, can I ask a question? Is this okay, Tom? Just a quick question.
Okay.
I'm just worried, is there a danger that this could be a kind of a trap in the same way that the Epstein right-wing critique, that leads to Cuba somehow, and that was always the reason given why the Kennedy, the cover-up, the Warren Commission was actually covering up is because it was concealing Soviet involvement in Kennedy's death, and that would lead to World War III, blah, blah, blah. So this had sort of just instinctually feels to me, given its provenance, given the kinds of things they're saying, that this could be kind of emerging from a place of we're protecting the role of certain allies, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, etc., and the outcry for war with these places would be such. It's sort of like a John Bear, anonymous, sleeping with the devil. You know what I mean? A sort of form of limited hangout that could actually bring us into a really ugly place where you have the American people calling for more war with more countries.
That is certainly what many people, not many, but certain people are asking those type of questions. My take is this. And I was there at the January 7th press conference when Bob Graham spoke and the others spoke. Also, I happen to know from Rick DeSantis a few things about his conversation with Walter Jones. Hopefully you all know as well of the experience of previous politicians who really tried to ask hard questions about 9/11. Cynthia McKinney, Max Cleland, Kurt Weldon, Mark Dayton, then of course Tom Daschle and Patrick Leahy, who challenged the Patriot Act, and of course I'm trying to get a web page. So Patrick Leahy, yeah. So
Do you have a clear sense of what the language might be? I mean, like how
in the 28 pages?
Yeah. Does it really implicate like U.S. government agencies in the planning of 9/11, or just cover up involvement of other countries?
It implicates, well, I mean, as far as the planning, here's what, one thing that Bob Graham has articulated is that based on this information, it is clear that there's no way these 19 Arabs could have acted on their own.
But
So
wait,
that-
I have a question about this. Can I ask a question? Having been at the September event here, and we heard from people who were there that day, and there's a chilling story by the woman. Oh, sorry. There was a chilling story by a woman who was there that day and was in a building next to the towers, and who saw one of the planes flying directly at her, and then it banked around the building she was in and flew into the first tower. I'll never forget this. she said that there was nobody in the cockpit, okay? Now, nobody in the cockpit of the plane. There was nobody, she saw nobody in the cockpit. Yeah, yeah, and this tallies with much that David Ray Griffin has written. There are serious questions as to whether there were 19 Saudi hijackers, because there's very little evidence that they existed. So I'm wondering,
That they were on the planes.
well, this drive to declassify the 28 pages, which I wholly support, seems to be predicated on the assumption that the Saudis were involved with the 19 hijackers, and I've already learned from the movement that there's serious questions as to whether there were 19 Saudi hijackers. So how do we, what do you say to that?
Sure. It's a distinction, here's the way to look at it, that 19 Arabs were definitely associated within 24 hours of the attacks. We all know that, the identities. Now, this is what I think is actually very, very positive about this whole development, because as this goes forward, this HR 14, this inquiry about the 28 pages, other questions come into play, such as, well, wait a minute, what about the fact that at least 7 of them were reported to be alive by the foreign press? You know, other questions like this. And then, what about the fact that Hani Hanjour flunked his Cessna flight lessons? You know, all these other questions, which starts to then unravel the whole thing. This is, folks, a way to start the thread doing this. Get wider and wider and wider. So
You look at this as a wedge, a nose under the tent.
this is what you want to say, a nose under 10. I think it's a very, very high potential catalyst to begin the unraveling and then of a much wider array of information.
It might be.
You know, and well, but here's the other thing I feel, and everybody just has to come to their own determination, is if the politicians taking these actions were, do you feel like they're in a position to bring forth the wider analysis of 9/11, whether it's the physical evidence, in those types of areas, that really get into the really controversial stuff, which, folks, that this is 1,000 times more radioactive than Watergate, okay? And these politicians are fully aware of this, and they're, I don't know, put yourself in their position. You know, it's all about, okay, I think they're acting tactically, because they're knowing that, okay, the 9/11 family members are after certain information. They're knowing that the issue of transparency is absolutely very, very instrumental and salient to the whole conversation of having a legitimate functional democracy, right? And so forth. So they are acting tactically, because they know. I mean, in the press conference on January 7th, a direct question was asked. I was sitting next to the guy about, is there anything in the 20 pages about Building 7? Now, imagine how that got in the room. By the way, in the room there was New York Times, Fox News, Cox News Network, McClatchy, you know, and a few others. They were in the room. And you know what the three up there, Bob Graham, Walter Jones, and Stephen Lynch, all they did, and I think this is very telling, they just, without a flinch, they just said, Graham said no. Totally matter-of-factly, no. Meaning, they know all about that information. So guess what? The staff knows. And the staff also will tell you that, no, we are not going to do anything where we can be labeled conspiracy theorists because of the power of the media to basically, completely marginalize them.
Let him make.
So, go ahead, Bill, Barry.
His point is correct. I mean, the whole thing could get turned red. The situation is so poisonous that any attempt to reveal truth can be completely turned. It's a definite risk. It's a risk we have to take. We need to take every single opportunity we can to expose this. Now, shortcut I just want to mention, you haven't mentioned it. Graham was very explicit. He said, finance Saudi Arabian government, he said this is not private, this is Saudi Arabian government, funding by the Saudi Arabian government of perpetrators of 9/11. And then he said specifically, through the embassy, the Saudi Arabian embassy. Now, everybody in this room should know that the Saudi Arabian ambassador to the United States at the time of September 11 was Bandar Bush. Does everybody know who Bandar Bush is? I mean, Bandar has been associated with the Bush family for decades. He's directly implicated in Iran-Contra. I mean, he's been around for a while. In fact, he's directly implicated in the false flag attack in Syria. All right? But I mean, as soon as you realize that Bandar is synonymous with this funding, you are looking at the Bush family. That's an important shortcut.
Right. And I think that's a very important time, because with the decades-long business relationship, which is written about in the book by Craig Unger, House of Bush, House of Saud, to me, this whole act, classifying those 28 pages, is a direct extension of that relationship.
Now, have you heard also that there's a mention of Israeli participation? I thought I heard that, it might have even been from Graham. Have you heard that, Les, or not? That there's a mention of Israeli input?
You mean the 28 pages?
Yes.
I've not heard that. I've not heard that. But they had, here's their words is certain other governments. We don't know what that means. We don't know what that means. So,
Pakistan? I mean, we already know that.
yeah. Now, if the question is being raised about Saudi funding, why not also bring up the ISI funding of $100,000 being wired from Pakistan, the ISI, right?
Excuse me, are they related to the planes or to the controlled demolition, or all together?
In 28 pages?
Yeah. Is this related only to the planes that?
No, it's related to
because
funding.
we are saying, if we are stating that it's a controlled demolition, it's something that is planned already.
There's nothing in there that, to my knowledge, having to do with the buildings. It's all the what I would call the geopolitical aspects, funding and governments involved, and
Specifically the hijackers.
particular.
Specifically the hijackers, and Mark's point is that, well, maybe the hijackers weren't in the planes. Well, that's right, but they had a role. They clearly had a role. They had the patsy role. Yeah, I mean, it's not like there was no Muhammad Atta. Muhammad Atta was out there. He did a whole lot of stuff leading into this, under obvious direction.
Right, and then there's an awful lot of anomalies associated with David Griffin wrote about. For instance, they're visiting nightclubs and casinos and drinking and doing drugs and all this stuff can be part of the unraveling. And this has gotten mainstream. Another major factor here is this has gotten mainstream news in the New York Times, even New York Post, CNN, and by the way, on this website right here, hr14.org, if you look at this link, resources, it's all there. Okay, Russ Baker has written about it also in quite a bit in Who, What, Why. Now, this, folks, is bringing attention to 9/11 that we ourselves will never be able to reach the amount of people for one article that this is bringing. This is bringing attention from not only the general public, millions of people, but maybe even the people throughout these halls here who are part of the left, who are part of the centuries-long populist struggle, that hopefully they can start to finally wake up and say, well, wait a minute, these 9/11 conspiracy folks, right? You know, maybe finally they'll add 9/11 to the other conspiracies that they're okay with, like, you know, Iran-Contra, you know, BCCI scandal, a few things like that. They're okay with those scandals. They're okay with those conspiracies. Now, hopefully, through this type of press coverage, they will finally start to see that it is safe. Matter of fact, I got an indication yesterday that this could very well be the case. Want to hear about social networking? And on the panel was David Swanson, huge anti-war activist, high profile, and Jeff Cohen. I'm sure you know these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And Fair, and truthaction.org. It's a big petition site. Anybody can go there and set up a petition, and they will help to promote these petitions, and even get rootsaction.org. Yeah, I said, and then even get it printed out and taken to Congress. So here's the interesting thing I find is that the left, which like this type of organization, which normally is not friendly to the topic of 9/11, when it comes to the fact that there is action on the political level, guess what? It clicks for them and say, "Wow, I can move with this. I can find space to take this seriously." You know what? I pointed out that there was already a petition on rootsaction.org for the release of the 28 pages, and I brought up this question, and this is a double message here. This coming Tuesday, there is going to be the introduction of a companion bill in the Senate. Okay, let's see if I think I have this here. And guess who's introducing it? Rand Paul, presidential candidate Rand Paul, and Senate Intelligence Committee member Ron Wyden. Here's the media advisory. See if I can get there. Sorry. Here it is. They are introducing a bill this coming Tuesday. It's called the Transparency for the Families of 9/11 Victims Act. Note the wording. Now, I brought this up in the seminar yesterday. I said there's already been one petition on the 20 pages on rootsaction.org. Now, with this new Senate bill coming in, how about, what would you suggest as a follow-up? And the answer I got was, David Swanson saying, yeah, we can set up the petition for you, and we can now promote this to our entire list of signers. And so they can do a huge promotion on this. Now that was a shocker. That would not have happened previous to this point in time. Yes, Cheryl.
Yeah, every time, to my knowledge, the mainstream media covers this issue, they report it in the context of the official story. Family members that Bob Graham has surrounded himself with are also, the official story.
Yeah.
So does that hurt us or help us when that's getting pounded out there all the time by the corporate, that this is about, the Saudis and the official story still stands?
As far as the family members, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate. This woman, Terry Strada, is totally within the official story guidelines. It's really unfortunate.
Right, but we're promoting this if we say we're behind this, and so is that hurting us or helping us? That's the
have
point.
to push forward,
you know.
have to, no matter what.
I mean, you know, we can't, I don't know. you
But
can't
can we
have-
do it with a sort of a different narrative? Can we say, yeah, we want to see the 28 pages because everybody should see those, but we already have all this research done and this and, you know,
Yeah.
the 19 hijackers, maybe, you know, some are still alive, and get that out there at the same time,
Yeah, yeah.
rather than just following
I'd be
their agenda.
Yeah, we're not, I don't see this as endorsing their narrative, especially when it comes
Okay,
to
that's what it sounds like to me.
to
so
Terry.
maybe I'm
No,
missing
no,
something.
no, it's very unfortunate, I wish there was what's very delicate about that is, she's a family member, and I actually saw this occur at the press conference where somebody went up to her and actually said to her, you know, please don't be in denial about this other information. She just flipped out. That's this emotional.
But aside from that, could we bring our own family members who, you know, see it the way we do and have them, you know, ask the questions and say, I'm a family member, but there's all this other information. I mean, I think
Sure.
if we just leave it in their hands, we're going to lose.
Sure, I mean, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
you
Mark.
know.
Go ahead, Dick.
Yeah, Wes, I just wonder, what has been the foreign coverage of this? That there must be people in Europe and certainly in Asia who critically evaluate this. They even have done some decent research and published material.
As far as foreign coverage of this particular.
You know, who've gone into the
Action.
9/11, you know, controversy and actually written critical articles.
Well, it covers the spectrum. It just
It
covers.
covers the whole,
In other words,
so the whole conspiracy.
See, when it comes to the mainstream press overseas, they seem to be in lockstep with the U.S. mainstream press. Yeah. We have a few more minutes until, so we get kicked out, yeah. But nobody's kicking us out, so. So, you know, what's interesting, just to extend on that, we go out to ground zero, and we do a lot of flyering at the museum site, the new museum site, with, let's see that flyer right there? The tall one, the long one? If you hold that up. Okay, and turn it around so you see. This is like, it looks like an official museum flyer. And there are people from all over the world, tourists from all over the world. And you'd just be amazed at how many of them already know, more so than Americans. This is what's unfortunately so challenging and so disappointing, that people, when they come in from all over the country and these bus tours, right? Because that is like a mecca. Down to the ground zero, and the new museum is like this pilgrimage that people make from all over the country and all over the world to get their experience of 9/11, and they come to that museum and they are subjected to this, I call it a $700 million monument to deception. That's why I advocate, folks, we need to have, you know, dozens of people. We need to have people there as often as possible to help us flying this. Please see me or Kat McGuire here anytime if you'd like to help out with that. Now, so as far as this resolution to the website hr14.org, we're hoping to get people just to make noise. For instance, okay, I spoke about Jerry Nadler. Now this guy is acting totally in contradiction to you know, every principle of what it is to represent the American public, especially the constituency of Lower Manhattan. So I don't know if this bothers anybody. I don't know if this makes you think, you know, we need to take some action here, you know. But what needs to happen is where we get, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of people to call his phone and to write letters and say, we want you to read the 28 pages, just bring up the 28 pages, because that's the only thing that they're gonna respond to. If anybody's in my district, Nidia Velasquez, you know, I will set up a meeting with her staff people, and we'll go, and we'll take some documents, we'll take some articles, and we'll get her aware of this. It's so important. You know, so I think there's a huge opportunity, actually, and for God's sakes, I would think that every person who's a, you know, progressive of any type would relish at the opportunity to rattle the chains here of our politicians.
Absolutely,
Rattle their chains.
absolutely.
Les, are people going to this Tuesday meeting that's happening, or are people going to that?
Yeah, it's in Washington DC. There's a press conference. It's going to be right next to the Capitol on an outdoor location.
So
I'm
people
going.
can go to this.
I'm going. It's Washington DC. I have the info, Barry. I'll email you something.
Is that the kind of thing where families would be able to ask questions? Or is
Yeah.
it just going to be to the media?
Yes.
Media only?
Yes, no, there should be Q&A.
Okay, so we can bring family members
Yes.
there, right? And
Yes.
you've got that planned?
Yeah, I'm going to Bob McIlvain. We'll see. It's coming up pretty quick here, but let's hope it. You know, in any event, family members and other researchers can get in touch with Rand Paul's staff, Bob Graham, Walter Jones' staff, and be submitting this information. Let's do it.
Yeah, it serves to do a function of showing them that there's interest.
Yes.
And of perhaps getting a question in that is revealing.
Absolutely. We can do that.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Thank you, Bob. Thank you to Mark Miller.
Attacking. That is a lot.